When you hear Romeo and Juliet, a very specific image likely pops into your mind, right? Two young, star-crossed lovers, maybe on a balcony, caught in this whirlwind romance, doomed by feuding families.
Yeah, it's the classic image.
It's the quintessential love story, instantly recognizable. But what if that familiar image, well, barely scratches the surface of a much deeper, older, and frankly more surprising tale?
That's exactly it.
Today, we're diving deep into William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Not just as a play, but as this dynamic cultural phenomenon, something with roots stretching way back, centuries even, and is constantly reinventing itself.
Absolutely. And what's truly remarkable, I think, is how a story from the, late 16th century can remain so incredibly potent. It just keeps speaking to different eras, different issues.
Yeah.
So our journey today will reveal the unexpected kind of ancient origins of this legend. We'll explore its complex, sometimes surprisingly modern themes, marvel at Shakespeare's genius, his unique craft in putting it together, and then trace its incredible, enduring legacy across global culture. We want to show why it still resonates so powerfully with you today.
Okay, so let's pull back the curtain on this iconic story. We all link Romeo and Juliet with Shakespeare, obviously, but here's where it gets really fascinating. This tale didn't just, appear fully formed from his brain.
Not at all, no.
Its roots stretch back far, far earlier than Elizabethan England.
You're absolutely right. When we look at the bigger picture, the play fits into this long, rich tradition of tragic romances that, well, you can trace them back to antiquity.
Antiquity, wow.
Yeah, you'll find striking parallels in ancient stories like Ovid's Pyramus and Thisbe. That features lovers whose parents were bitter rivals, and there's a tragic misunderstanding, involving a false belief of death. Sound familiar?
Very familiar.
There's even the Physiaca from around the 3rd century. It includes a potion that induces a death-like sleep and, again, separated lovers. So these core elements, they were already circulating.
And what about those famous family names, Montague and Capulet? Were they always these sworn, feuding enemies we picture?
Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at how they evolved, While Dante Alighieri mentions the Montagues and Capuletti, the Capulets, in his Divine Comedy around the 14th century.
Okay.
It's not quite the star-crossed lovers scenario we know. Dante wasn't really crafting a love story there. He was using them in this, fiery political rant. He was lamenting the endless petty squabbles between rival families in his own time in Lombardy.
So just symbols of feuding.
Pretty much. But the idea of the grief of lost offspring, that deeply emotional aspect, that seems to be Shakespeare's unique poetic touch.
So, if not Dante, who really put the Romeo and Juliet we recognize on the map before Shakespeare got to it?
Right. Well, the earliest known version that truly resembles Shakespeare's is Masuccio Salernitano's Mariotto and Ginozza. That's from 1476. It contains so many familiar plot points. The secret marriage, a friar who helps them, a prominent citizen gets killed, the lover's exiled. There's a forced marriage plot for the woman, the potion, and that crucial lost message. All there.
Wow. But what's the difference?
Well, here's the twist. In Salernitano's version, Mariotto is actually caught and beheaded, and Ginozza dies of grief after she hears about his execution.
Oh, wow. That's quite a bit bleaker. So who shaped it into the form that's closer to what we know today?
That would be Luigi da Porto, around 1524. He significantly adapted the tale, called it Giulietta e Romeo.
Ah, they're the names.
Exactly. He's the one who first gave us the specific names of the lovers, the rival families, Montecchi and Capuletti, and set the whole tragic drama in Verona.
Okay, setting it in Verona, that's key.
Definitely. And he also introduced some of the key supporting characters we love. Friar Lawrence, Mercutio, Tybalt, Count Paris, and the nurse.
Wow, he added a lot.
He did. And crucially, da Porto originated the iconic love scenes, including that legendary balcony scene, or, well, window scene originally, and he crafted the lovers' suicides as the resolution, which then leads to the family's reconcile.
The balcony scene. We definitely have to dig into that specific detail later. Sounds like it has its own surprising story.
It does.
So Shakespeare then got his hands on these earlier versions. He read these.
Precisely. So Matteo Bandello published his own version in 1554, and he added Benvolio to the mix.
Gotcha.
This was then translated into French by Pierre Boiseau, and then importantly into English verse by Arthur Brooke in 1562. His poem was called The Tragical History of Romeo and Juliet.
Right, Brooks' poem. I've heard that was a major source.
Huge source. And then William Paynter retold it in prose in 1567. Shakespeare borrowed heavily from both Brooke and Paynter. He follows Brooke's poem quite closely in terms of plot, but he expanded it significantly and, most importantly, really developed those key supporting characters, especially Mercutio and the nurse, giving them so much more depth and personality.
So he didn't just, copy the plot points.
Right.
He fundamentally transformed the audience's connection to these side characters by giving them such life.
That's a great way to put it. His work on Mercutio and the nurse truly set his version apart.
And when do scholars think Shakespeare actually wrote his version?
The general consensus is somewhere between 1591 and 1595. It first got published in 1597, but in what scholars now call a bad quarto.
A bad quarto, what's that?
Think of it like a really rough, maybe even bootleg copy, probably pieced together from actors' memories, full of errors and missing bits. But then a much better, more complete and reliable version came out in 1599. That one was likely based on Shakespeare's own working draft, and that's the text we mostly know today.
Okay, now let's really get into what this deep dive is all about. The core ideas. Romeo and Juliet often gets flattened into this simple story of, young, doomed love.
Right.
But it's packed with so much more under the surface. So what are some of the play's most powerful, most enduring themes?
Well, connecting this to the bigger picture, scholars actually find it pretty challenging to pin down just one main theme. The play is incredibly rich, just woven through with multiple intertwining ideas that make it so complex.
Okay, let's start with the big one, love. How does Shakespeare explore it? How does he make their love feel so, real and important?
Well, what's fascinating is how Shakespeare portrays their love. So on their first meeting, Romeo and Juliet communicate using these really sophisticated metaphors and, saints and sins, pilgrims.
Yeah, that whole exchange.
Right. And that wasn't just fancy poetry. It was actually a pretty clever, non-threatening way for Romeo to sort of test the waters, see how Juliet felt. Apparently, elegant books of the time even recommended techniques like that.
No way.
Yeah. And Juliet, she immediately picks up on it, engages with the metaphor, expands on it. It shows that instant connection. And despite all the passion, their love is only consummated within marriage, which was actually vital for keeping the audience on their side back then.
And it's also often said their love is really closely tied up with death. How does that play out?
Oh, it's everywhere. It's a really pervasive connection. Throughout the play, characters, including Romeo and Juliet themselves, often fantasize about death, sometimes equating it with a lover.
Like Capulet saying, death deflowered Juliet.
Exactly that. And Juliet later explicitly links Romeo and death in that chilling line. Oh, happy dagger, this is thy sheath, there rust, and let me die.
Yeah.
This constant linking of intense passion and, oblivion, it makes you ask that question. Does their love somehow find its fullest, maybe its most profound expression only in death? It's a heavy thought.
So what about fate versus chance, that whole star-crossed thing from the prologue? Are they doomed from the start, or is it more just a horrible series of unlucky breaks?
And scholars are really quite divided on this. That tension is probably part of why the play still grabs us. The phrase star-crossed lovers definitely suggests destiny, right? An unavoidable path.
Seems pretty clear.
But many interpretations see the play as the sequence of just agonizingly unlucky chances and coincidences, like Romeo's challenge to Tybalt after Mercutio dies. You could argue it's presented as almost an expected action for that time, driven by circumstance and honor codes, not necessarily some impulsive tragic flaw in Romeo himself.
Okay, so context matters.
Exactly. And that view makes the play, for some, less a tragedy of character and more an emotional melodrama of pure bad luck, just highlighting how easily things can spiral out of control.
Let's talk about the imagery, too. Light and dark seem to be everywhere in the play. It feels almost like another character.
Oh, absolutely. The consistent use of that duality is really striking. Romeo calls Juliet the sun, brighter than a torch, a jewel in the night, a bright angel.
Right.
And Juliet, she calls Romeo day and night, whiter than snow upon a raven's back. The stark contrast, it vividly symbolizes their young, pure love trying to survive amidst the darkness of the family feud. And it also creates this powerful, dramatic irony. Their love flourishes in the shadows at night, while all the feuding happens in broad daylight. And then at the end, that gloomy morning, the sun hiding its face. It reflects a true inner darkness of the feud, maybe signifying a return to some kind of natural, albeit really sorrowful, order after they die.
And time itself. It feels like it's constantly pushing them forward, like a force they just can't escape.
That's such a crucial aspect of their struggle. You feel it constantly. Romeo and Juliet desperately try to create this little world outside of time, free from its constraints, but they're always battling against it.
Like Juliet worrying about the inconstant moon.
Exactly. Her plea, "Oh, swear not by the moon, the inconstant moon, lest that thy love prove likewise variable," shows how aware she is of time just slipping away. And the play itself is incredibly compressed. It all happens in just 4 to 6 days.
4 to 6 days. Wow, that's intense.
Right. It's a stark contrast to Brooks' poem, The Source, which took 9 months. This creates that headlong rush towards doom. Shakespeare emphasizes it by using short time references for the lovers versus long time for the older generation.
That's clever.
And in a way, through their tragic death, they achieve this strange kind of immortality through art, through the story itself. They defeat time paradoxically. Shakespeare actually uses over 100 references to time just to create this illusion of speed for the audience watching in, broad daylight.
So Shakespeare masterfully weaves these themes, compresses time.
Right.
But how does he actually structure the play to pull us in and deliver that gut punch at the end? His dramatic skill is just incredible.
It really is. And one of his most effective techniques here is his use of these abrupt, almost jarring shifts from comedy to tragedy.
Yeah, the beginning is surprisingly fun.
Right. Lots of body humor, Mercutio's wit.
Yeah.
But then after Mercutio's accidental death in Act 3, the tone just drastically shifts. It becomes serious, heavy, tragic.
A point of no return.
Exactly. But even then, he manages to maintain this sliver of hope right until the very last scene in the tomb. It builds incredible suspense. And this technique, it just heightens the tragic impact when all that hope finally fails, makes the fall even more devastating.
He also uses subplots really effectively, doesn't he? They're not just side stories.
No, they're absolutely essential. Take the subplot of Romeo's initial crush on Rosaline, who rejects him.
Right. Poor Romeo at the start.
It serves a vital purpose. It highlights how profound and serious and, frankly, different his love for Juliet is by comparison. It's not just another infatuation.
Ah, good point.
Similarly, Paris, wanting to marry Juliet, that provides a contrast showing you the real depth of her feelings for Romeo. And of course, the whole Montague Capulet feud isn't just background noise. It creates that intense atmosphere of hate, that societal pressure cooker that ultimately drives the whole tragedy.
And Shakespeare's language, I mean, it's obviously poetic, but it's also so precise and adaptable.
It's just masterful. He uses a stunning variety of poetic forms. He even kicks things off with a formal Shakespearean sonnet for the prologue.
Right.
A lot of the play is in blank verse, that iambic pentameter, the da-dee-dum rhythm.
The heartbeat rhythm.
Exactly. It sounds quite natural, like heightened speech, but carries poetic weight. But he's so clever in matching the form to the character. Friar Lawrence often uses these sermon-like forms, and the nurse speaks in a blank verse that brilliantly mimics, colloquial, everyday chat.
Yeah, she sounds very distinct.
Totally. And when Romeo first talks about Rosaline, he tries using that old-fashioned Petrarchan sonnet form, the kind used for unattainable courtly love. But the second he meets Juliet, they shift together into a more contemporary sonnet form. And later, Juliet even breaks the form sometimes, like she's searching for genuine expression beyond just poetic tricks.
Yeah.
And she uses really simple, often one-syllable words with Romeo, which contrasts so sharply with her formal language when she has to talk to Paris. Oh, and don't forget the humor. Over 175 puns and wordplays, many of them pretty sexual, especially between Mercutio and the nurse.
It's wild to think of that kind of humor right alongside the intense tragedy.
It is. It keeps it grounded, maybe, more human.
So given all this complexity, the history, the themes, the craft, what did early critics actually make of this play? And how have interpretations changed over, centuries?
It's quite a journey, actually. The earliest known critic we have a record from, Samuel Pepys, famously wrote in his diary in 1662 that it was the worst that I ever heard in my life.
Ouch, really?
Yep. But then you have someone like John Dryden, later in the 17th century, praising Mercutio, saying Shakespeare was forced to kill him to prevent being killed by him, basically saying Mercutio was such a great character he threatened to overshadow the leads.
That's quite a compliment.
It is. Then, in the 18th and 19th centuries, criticism often got bogged down in the play's moral message. Was Romeo too reckless? Was Friar Lawrence too hasty? People debated whether the tragedy was caused by character flaws or just, sheer accident.
It's fate versus chance thing again.
Exactly.
Sure.
By the early 20th century, you had critics like Richard Green Moulton arguing quite strongly for the accident theory, that it was mostly a chain of unfortunate events.
So how have more modern academic approaches reshaped how we see it? Like psychoanalytic criticism, That seems like it would have a field day with these intense emotions.
Oh, absolutely. Modern psychology offers a very different lens. Psychoanalytic critics, for instance, they don't just see Romeo's impulsiveness as a personality trait. They often view it as maybe a manifestation of ill-controlled aggression that contributes to both Mercutio's death and the final double suicide.
Interesting.
And some, like Julia Kristeva, have even argued that the intense hatred between the families actually fuels Romeo and Juliet's passion, that it's intertwined. You see it in Juliet's line, "My only love sprung from my only hate."
Wow, that flips it.
It does. It suggests the passion is inseparable from the violence. And this has even led to some speculation about Shakespeare's own psychology, maybe his grief for his own son, Hamnet, who died young, though that's obviously more speculative.
And what about feminist criticism? A society with these warring families, arranged marriages. There must be a lot to unpack there.
Definitely. Feminist critics, like Copilia Khan, often argue that Verona's really deeply patriarchal society, with its strict masculine code of honor and violence, is fundamentally to blame for the tragedy.
How so?
Well, look at how Romeo feels he becomes effeminate because of his love for Juliet, and then he snaps back into this violent, vengeful mode after Mercutio dies. It highlights this destructive pressure on men. The feud itself is often linked to this toxic idea of male virility.
Right.
However, other critics also point out Juliet's strength. Her refusal to marry Paris, challenging her father's absolute authority that actually reflects some emerging Puritan ideas about marriage at the time, which were more sympathetic to choosing your own partner based on love, a love match. So it shows her having agency in a way that maybe wasn't possible in earlier versions of the story.
This raises another important angle. What about queer theory? Are there other ways to read the relationships and dynamics in the play?
Indeed, and this has opened up some really fascinating interpretations. Jonathan Goldberg, for instance, he's looked closely at Mercutio's character through a queer theory lens.
Okay.
He suggests there might be an unacknowledged homoerotic desire for Romeo, pointing to Mercutio's very witty but also sexually suggestive banter, particularly his remarks about Romeo's phallus.
I never thought of it that way.
And Romeo's initial fixation on Rosalind, who is distant, unavailable, offers no chance of having children. Some read that as potentially reflecting homosexual concerns, or at least a questioning of the standard heterosexual romance plot. Even Juliet's famous line, "That which we call rose, by any other name would smell as sweet," can be seen as raising a broader question. Is there really a fundamental difference between the beauty of a man and a woman? Or between different kinds of love?
But looking beyond the surface labels.
Exactly. These interpretations highlight how different critical perspectives can unlock new layers of meaning, even in a play we think we know so well.
Now, speaking of iconic images we think we know, the balcony scene. It's the image of Romeo and Juliet for most people. But here's one of the biggest surprises, right? Shakespeare's original play didn't actually have one.
It's true. That's a genuinely surprising fact for many people. So the scene itself, the idea of Romeo visiting Juliet at her window, that was introduced by Luigi da Porto back in 1524. He had Romeo climbing up while Juliet was at her window.
Okay, so the idea was there earlier.
Right. But Shakespeare's original stage directions, or the dialogue itself, they don't mention a balcony. In fact, the word balcony didn't even exist in the English language until 2 years after Shakespeare died.
No way. So where did the balcony come from?
The visual, the actual structure, became iconic much later. There was a play by Thomas Otway in 1679 that borrowed heavily from Romeo and Juliet, and that one featured a balcony. Then David Garrick's very popular 18th century adaptation really cemented the use of a physical balcony on stage.
Garrick. He changed a lot, didn't he?
He did, and that tradition just stuck. So that classic image burned into your mind. It wasn't actually in Shakespeare's original staging.
So what does all this history, all these interpretations, what does it mean for the play's incredible, sprawling legacy? How has Romeo and Juliet lived on? Not just on stage, but way beyond.
Oh, its afterlife is just astonishing. Romeo and Juliet consistently ranks as one of Shakespeare's most performed and adapted plays, right from his own lifetime. An interesting bit of trivia. The first professional female actress to play Juliet was Mary Saunderson in 1662. Before that, boys played the female roles.
Right.
And for over a century, David Garrick's altered version really dominated the stage. He cut stuff he thought was indecent. He even moved some of Rosalind's lines over to Juliet to make her seem more consistently faithful from the start.
Trying to clean it up.
Kind of. But then in the 19th century, you had figures like Charlotte Cushman, who actually became famous for playing Romeo as a woman.
Really? Playing Romeo?
Yeah. And performers like her helped restore Shakespeare's original text, leading to more realism in performance, moving away from Garrick's version.
And the 20th and 21st centuries have seen some truly radical takes on the play.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
You have Franco Zeffirelli's 1960 stage production, and then his huge 1968 film. He famously cut about a third of the text to make it more accessible, really focusing on that theme of love and the total breakdown of understanding between two generations.
That film was massive.
It was. And more recently, performances have just fearlessly embraced contemporary settings. You might see switchblades instead of swords. Maybe Romeo dies by a hypodermic needle. There have been really powerful productions setting it amidst the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or during South African apartheid.
Using it to comment on modern conflicts.
Exactly. And just this year, 2024, you had Tom Holland in London and Rachel Zegler on Broadway in major productions. Zegler's revival even made history for attracting such a young audience and getting a Tony nomination. It keeps finding new life.
And it's truly exploded beyond the stage, hasn't it? From ballet to Bollywood, Romeo and Juliet is just everywhere.
It really is. The sheer breadth of its influence is remarkable. Prokofiev's ballet is probably the best-known musical adaptation.
The music is iconic.
Totally. Though,
Really?
interestingly, it was initially rejected. People thought the music was too experimental, and Prokofiev originally proposed a happy ending.
A happy ending. Can you imagine?
Right. In music, there are over 24 operas based on it, including Gounod's very famous Romeo and Juliet. And Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet Fantasy Overture gave us that instantly recognizable love theme, that soaring melody. It basically created a musical shorthand for romance that film directors have copied ever since.
Ah, so that's where that comes from.
And the plays inspired jazz, loads of popular music artists like Dire Straits, Taylor Swift, and of course the absolute legend that is West Side Story, which brilliantly reimagined the feuding families as rival New York gangs.
And it influences other stories, movies, even things like architecture and video games. It feels like a cultural blueprint.
It really does. When we connect this to the bigger picture, you could argue Shakespeare invented the formula that the sexual becomes the erotic when crossed by the shadow of death. That idea profoundly influenced centuries of literature, making romance a subject worthy of high tragedy.
Wow.
The word Romeo itself, it's literally become a synonym for male lover. It's one of Shakespeare's most illustrated works. On screen, it's arguably the most filmed play ever. You've got versions from George Cukor's classic Hollywood take to Baz Luhrmann's very MTV-inspired Romeo plus Juliet.
Love that one.
Right. Which was the highest-grossing Shakespeare film ever at the time. You even find echoes of it in the Sims 2 video game. There are rival families, the Caps and the Montes, living in a town called Veronaville.
That's hilarious.
And here's a really surprising fun fact. 2 of the moons orbiting Uranus are named Juliet and Mab after characters from the play.
Get out. Moons.
Moons. And even architecture has adopted, the term Juliet balcony for those small ornamental balconies, all thanks to the enduring visual power of that scene, even if the balcony wasn't originally Shakespeare's.
Wow. We've really covered a lot of ground today, diving deep into Romeo and Juliet, tracing its journey from ancient tales to Shakespeare's stage, and then through centuries of constant reinvention. It truly is a story that refuses to die.
It really is. And this brings up, I think, a crucial question for all of us listening. What does it tell you that this story about star-crossed lovers, born from a feuding, violent past, continues to resonate so powerfully today? In our hyper-modern world, it's adapted for everything from, social media trends to Bollywood epics. It keeps challenging and reflecting our own shifting ideas about love, about conflict, about fate.
Yeah.
It really seems that while times change drastically, that core human experience of intense, overwhelming love and the painful, tragic consequences of division and hate, those things remain timeless.
It's something to think about long after our deep dive ends. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving into something really fundamental, something so woven into our lives you might think, yeah, I know fire, but I promise you there's way more to its story than you might expect.
Well, absolutely.
We're talking about fire.
Yeah.
Beyond just that flickering flame we see, it's this, profound force. It's literally shaped our planet, shaped our lives in ways that are actually pretty mind-blowing when you dig into it.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission today, Let's go way beyond that mesmerizing light and heat. We want to explore the basic science, its ancient history on Earth, how it completely transformed humanity, and yeah, its really complex role today. Sometimes good, sometimes that's good.
A double-edged sword for sure.
Exactly. And we've got some fascinating details from our source material to unpack.
Looking forward to it. You know, fire isn't just a simple chemical thing. It's this huge ecological engine, a really deep cultural force, too. At its most, well, basic level, it's a rapid dance between a fuel and an oxidizer, usually oxygen from the air. And it releases a lot of energy as heat and light. That's what scientists call exothermic. It generates its own heat, basically.
Okay, exothermic, got it.
And the part we actually see, that visible flame, that happens when the fuel hits its ignition point temperature.
Right.
For the fuels we see most often, like wood or gas hydrocarbon fuels, those flames are mostly made of carbon dioxide, water vapor, oxygen, and nitrogen.
That visible flame. It's captivating, isn't it? But you're saying there's even more going on, something maybe a bit unexpected.
Oh, absolutely. What's truly fascinating here, and maybe a bit mind-bending, is that if a flame gets hot enough, the gases inside it can actually become ionized. They can produce plasma.
Plasma, like the fourth state of matter from a regular fire.
Exactly. Think about that. Fire isn't just chemistry. It can be this fundamental transformation of matter itself. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
And the color, you know, the intensity of the flame, that depends a lot on what's burning the fuel type and what gases are around it.
Makes sense.
Now, obviously, fire can be incredibly destructive, conflagrations, physical damage. We all know that side of it.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But it also has these really profound positive effects in nature. In lots of ecosystems, fire actually stimulates plant growth. It helps maintain ecological balance.
Okay, you mentioned the good sides, the ecological benefits, but especially lately with all the massive wildfires, it's hard for people to see past the destruction. How do those two sides fit together?
It's a really critical paradox. And yeah, the negative effects of uncontrolled fires are serious. Atmospheric pollution, water contamination, that's definitely part of it.
Right.
And when fire burns away all the plants holding the ground together, heavy rain can cause massive soil erosion afterward.
Okay.
And here's a key detail. Burning releases nitrogen from the plants and soil into the atmosphere. That's a loss for the soil. But, and this is the other side of the coin, other vital nutrients like potassium and phosphorus, they actually stay behind in the ash.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they get recycled back into the soil really quickly. It's like a natural fertilizer boost for the next round of growth.
So it clears things out, but also leaves behind some essentials.
Precisely. And, you know, throughout history, fire was seen as one of the 4 classical elements. Humans have used it for just about everything. Ancient rituals, clearing land for farming.
Cooking, obviously.
Cooking, warmth, light, signaling across distances. You name it. We've harnessed it for power, for melting and shaping metals, smelting, forging, incinerating waste, cremation. And yes, tragically, as a weapon, too.
It's just amazing how deeply embedded it is, and it goes back so far, long before us. Your source mentioned the fossil record.
Yes, way back. The absolute earliest sniff of fire we have evidence for is the Middle Ordovician period. We're talking about 470 million years ago.
Wow. 470 million.
And the timing isn't random. It lines up perfectly with when the first proper land plants started establishing themselves.
Okay, so the plants came first, then the fire.
Exactly. Because those early land plants started pumping huge amounts of oxygen into the atmosphere. And wildfire only really became possible once atmospheric oxygen got above roughly 13%. Below that, things just don't burn well enough.
So those first plants basically set the stage, oxygen-wise, for fire to become this big planetary force.
You got it. They laid the groundwork. And the first actual recorded wildfire we see in the fossil record, that's from the late Silurian, about 420 million years ago. We know because we find fossilized plants that are clearly charred.
Charred fossils.
Yeah. Incredible.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, there's this really strong correlation. The amount of oxygen in the atmosphere over geologic time lines up really well with how much charcoal we find in those fossil records.
Oh, so more oxygen.
More fire.
Yeah.
It really points to oxygen being the key limiting factor for wildfire through most of Earth's history.
Then fire became even more common when grasses evolved and spread, maybe around 6 to 7 million years ago. Grasses, you know, they make fantastic tinder, they dry out easily, spread fire quickly.
Right, like kindling everywhere.
Exactly.
And this next bit is truly mind-bending. This huge increase in wildfires driven by grasses might have actually kicked off a feedback loop. where the fires themselves create a warmer, drier climate, which then led to more fire.
That's the theory, yeah. A kind of positive feedback where fire begets more fire on a massive scale. It's a really powerful idea.
Wow. A planetary fire cycle.
And that leads us right into this concept of the Pyrocene.
The Pyrocene. Okay, what's that?
It's a term some scientists use to describe our current era, basically. The period defined by the massive influence of human fire activity on Earth. And that includes, crucially, burning fossil fuels.
Ah, so it's our age of fire.
In a way, yes. When early humans first learned to control fire, that was a game changer, a really dramatic shift. Suddenly, people could live in colder climates, they could use dark caves, they had protection against predators.
It's hard to even imagine life before that control.
Okay.
So, okay, warmth, safety. But how did it fundamentally change, like human evolution and society?
Well, it totally changed dinner.
Right. Cooking.
Cooking food with fire made a huge difference. It increased the variety of foods people could eat, made nutrients much more available, and it killed off a lot of diseases by neutralizing pathogens in the food.
That's huge.
Absolutely. We find hints of occasional cooked food going back maybe 1 million years.
1 million, wow.
Suggest early, maybe opportunistic use. But regular, consistent use, that seems to date back to about 400,000 years ago.
Okay.
And widespread, common use seems to kick in around 50 to 100,000 years ago, which is really interesting because that's roughly the same time that human populations started showing genetic adaptations, resistance to air pollution.
Well, that's quite a parallel. We adapt to the smoke as we master the flames.
Seems like it. And then we see increasingly sophisticated uses, making charcoal, using fire to manage wildlife. That goes back tens of thousands of years.
Right. And then fast forward to the Neolithic Revolution, farming starts, and suddenly fire becomes this landscape management tool worldwide.
Indeed. And here it's really important to distinguish between what people call cool fires and hot fires.
Okay.
Cool fires are controlled burns. They tend to burn relatively low to the ground, clear out undergrowth, leaf litter, that sort of thing.
Right.
Hot fires are the big, uncontrolled ones that roar through the canopy and can be incredibly damaging.
Gotcha. So cool fires have benefits.
Definitely. By clearing out that undergrowth, they actually prevent the buildup of fuel that could lead to a massive destructive hot fire later on.
Preventative maintenance, kind of.
Exactly. They also create more varied environments, little patches of different habitats, which is good for game animals and plant diversity. And they can make dense forests easier to move through.
Okay.
And then there's slash and burn agriculture, still used today in parts of tropical Africa, Asia, South America. You cut down vegetation, let it dry, burn it.
To clear the land and get nutrients in the soil.
Right. The ash provides nutrients. It's been a viable technique for a long time.
I sense a but coming. While it worked historically, this whole fire management strategy is running into problems today, isn't it?
Yes, and this raises a really important question for our time. While these methods worked well for smaller populations and vast landscapes, today things are different. We have growing populations, forests are much more fragmented, chopped up.
And the climate is warming.
And the climate is warming, making things drier and more fire-prone in many places. The result is that these controlled burns, or fires that escape from slash and burn, are increasingly turning into massive, uncontrolled megafires.
Right, like we're seeing now.
Exactly. These harm ecosystems, destroy infrastructure, cause huge health problems from the smoke, and they pump enormous amounts of carbon and soot into the atmosphere.
Which could then cause more warming.
Feeding back into the cycle, potentially. Yeah. The scale we're talking about is just immense. Up to 5 million square kilometers. That's an area more than half the size of the entire U.S. burns every year.
That's staggering.
It's a very stark reminder of, well, the unintended consequences of our massive influence on the planet. And just to round off the history of understanding it, our scientific view shifted too. We went from fire as one of the 4 classical elements.
Earth, air, fire, water.
Right. To a more empirical understanding. Antoine Lavoisier, the French chemist, back in 1777. He was the one who famously showed that burning wasn't about releasing some mythical substance called phlogiston.
Right, the phlogiston theory.
He demonstrated it actually involved taking up a component from the air, what he eventually called oxygen. That really changed everything.
From basic survival, needing it for warmth, to understanding its fundamental chemistry. What a journey. And its role as a tool for transformation, but also, sadly, for destruction. They kept evolving too, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Today, pretty much every single person uses controlled fire every day, often without thinking about it.
Like our cars.
Internal combustion engines in vehicles, prime example. On a much bigger scale, think thermal power stations. They generate electricity for a huge chunk of humanity.
How do they work, basically?
They ignite fuels, coal, oil, natural gas to boil water, create massive amounts of steam, and that high-pressure steam drives turbines, which generate the electricity.
So fire boiling water on an industrial scale.
Pretty much. And, when things burn, there are leftovers. We even have specific terms for the unburnable solid bits.
Oh, yeah.
If the leftover stuff melts in the flame but then solidifies as it cools, forming hard, glassy chunks, that's called clinker. Think of what you might find cleaning out an old coal furnace.
Okay, clinker.
But if the unburnable stuff doesn't melt and you're just left with fine, powdery residue, like from a campfire, that's ash.
Clinker and ash. Got it. So fire powers our world, our cars, our cities, often invisibly. But like any powerful force, it's got that darker history too, especially in warfare.
A very long and dark history, yes. Fire was the basis for pretty much all early thermal weapons. Incendiary devices, heating up projectiles to launch them, using smoke.
And didn't the Byzantines have something special?
Ah, yes. The Byzantine fleet famously used Greek fire. We still don't know the exact formula, but it was some kind of chemical mixture they could spray onto enemy ships and soldiers, and it was incredibly hard to extinguish, probably petroleum-based.
Greek fire. Sounds terrifying.
It was meant to be.
And this next development you mentioned is really something. Gunpowder, invented in China, leads to the fire lance around 1000 CE, like a precursor to the flamethrower.
Essentially, yes. A tube packed with gunpowder and sometimes projectiles, spitting fire and shrapnel. Fast forward quite a bit, and you get actual modern flamethrowers first used by German troops in World War I around 1915.
Wow, WWI.
And the development didn't stop. You had hand-thrown incendiary bombs like Molotov cocktails showing up in the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s.
Right.
Then in World War II, incendiary bombs were used extensively by both sides. Axis and allies. They caused deliberate firestorms in cities like Hamburg and Dresden.
Devastating.
Firestorms intentionally created. Yes. The U.S. Army Air Force also used them heavily against Japanese cities, many of which had lots of wood and paper construction, making them terribly vulnerable.
And napalm, that's another one people know.
Napalm, yeah. It's a thicker, stickier, incendiary gel. It was developed and used starting in 1944, late in WWII, but it really became infamous, gained wide public attention during the Vietnam War.
Such incredible power, used for creation and horrific destruction.
Let's maybe shift back a bit, dig deeper into the actual flame itself, the physics, the chemistry, that intricate dance.
Okay, so at its absolute core, fire is that chemical process. You have a fuel reacting with an oxidizing agent. Usually that agent is oxygen from the air.
Right.
And the typical products are carbon dioxide and water, plus heat and light. But the oxidizer doesn't have to be oxygen.
Oh, like what else?
Well, there are some pretty exotic examples. Chlorine trifluoride, for instance.
Yeah?
It's such a powerful oxidizer, it can actually ignite sand.
Ignite sand. Sure.
Right.
Seriously. But for most fires we encounter, it's fuel plus oxygen plus heat. This leads to what firefighters call the fire tetrahedron.
Tetrahedron, like a pyramid shape, 4 sides.
Exactly. 4 things you need for a fire to start and keep going. You need fuel,
Okay.
an oxidizer, usually oxygen,
Right.
sufficient heat to get it started,
Ignition.
and crucially, a sustained chemical chain reaction. That rapid oxidation has to keep itself going. All 4 elements have to be there in the right mix.
Fuel, oxidizer, heat, chain reaction, the fire tetrahedron. So that's basically the blueprint for putting a fire out then.
Yeah.
Remove one of the 4.
Precisely. That's the fundamental principle of firefighting. Once a fire is ignited, that chain reaction releases more heat, which keeps the fire propagating as long as it has continuous fuel and oxidizer.
Makes sense.
Now, what's really fascinating and maybe not obvious is the role of gravity.
Gravity. How does gravity affect fire?
Through convection. In normal gravity, the hot gases from the flame rise, right?
Yeah.
That upward movement draws fresh, oxygen-rich air in at the bottom, feeding the flame, and it carries away the combustion products, like CO2.
Okay.
But take gravity away, like on the International Space Station.
Yeah. What happens?
Fire behaves totally differently. Without gravity pulling the denser cold air down and letting the hot air rise, there's no convection current. The combustion products, CO2, etc., just kind of hang around the flame, forming a sphere.
A sphere of gas.
And they quickly displace the oxygen, smothering the flame. So fire in space without airflow actually puts itself out pretty fast.
That's amazing. So fire needs gravity, in a way, to breathe properly here on Earth. What does that mean for space travel safety? Or even just understanding combustion better?
Oh, it's huge for space safety, especially when a spacecraft is just coasting. In inertial flight, they have to design systems very differently. And yes, studying microgravity flames helps us understand the fundamentals of combustion better, which could lead to improvements here.
So back to the tetrahedron. Putting out a fire means breaking one of those links.
Exactly. Turn off the gas supply, you remove the fuel, cover a small flame with a lid, you cut off the oxidizer, spray water on it, you remove heat and maybe smother it a bit. Use a special chemical like halon used to be used for. That disrupts the chain reaction itself.
Got it. And making a fire bigger or hotter.
You do the opposite. Increase the rate of combustion. You can do that by getting the fuel and oxidizer mix just right, what chemists call stoichiometric proportions. That's the ideal ratio where everything burns most efficiently.
Stoichiometric. Okay.
Or you can just increase the input of fuel and air, raise the surrounding temperature, or sometimes add a catalyst to speed things up.
And the different colors we see in flames, you mentioned that earlier, they tell a story too.
They absolutely do. Most flames we see, called diffusion flames, emit visible light, infrared heat, sometimes even a bit of ultraviolet. That familiar yellow-orange glow from burning wood or a candle, that comes from tiny, glowing hot particles of soot, basically unburnt carbon. They glow across a continuous spectrum, like a hot piece of metal.
Soot makes the yellow-orange. What about blue flames, like on a gas stove?
Right. A clean-burning gas flame is blue because the combustion is much more complete. You don't get much soot. The blue light comes from specific molecules within the flame getting excited and releasing energy at very specific single wavelengths. It's a different mechanism.
Fascinating. Are there other weird flame colors?
Oh, yeah. Hydrogen burning in chlorine gas produces hydrogen chloride, and the flame can look different. Boron. Boron burns with this incredibly intense green flame. Its nickname is actually Green Dragon.
Green Dragon. Cool. And gravity affects the color too, right? You mentioned the candle in space.
Yes. Under normal gravity, that convection current pulls the flame upwards, making it tall and yellow because soot forms and rises. In microgravity, without convection.
It becomes a sphere.
A sphere, yes.
Yeah.
And it tends to be more blue and actually burns more efficiently because the heat doesn't rise away as fast. Though, as we said, it can go out if the CO2 builds up right around it and can't disperse.
So strange.
NASA experiments have shown that in microgravity, soot actually gets oxidized or burned up more completely. Discoveries like that could potentially lead to ways to make combustion engines here on Earth more efficient, produce less soot.
Wow. Space experiments helping with car engines. Who knew?
Science works in cool ways. And just to give a sense of scale, flame temperatures vary wildly. Something exotic like oxydecyanoacetylene can burn at almost 5,000 degrees Celsius.
Whoa.
Whereas a simple candle flame is around 1,000 degrees C. Still very hot, obviously.
Still wouldn't touch it. It's just incredible the level of detail science can uncover about something so familiar. And all this understanding, it must feed directly into how we try to manage fire, right? For prevention, protection.
Absolutely. Fire science is a whole field. It's a branch of physical science looking at fire behavior, how flames spread, the dynamics of combustion, all with very practical applications. Fire protection engineering, fire investigations, wildfire management, they all rely on this science. And ecologically speaking, we now understand that pretty much every natural land ecosystem has its own typical fire pattern, its fire regime. And the plants and animals there are adapted to it, sometimes even dependent on.
Like needing fire to reproduce or something.
Exactly. Some pine cones only open and release seeds after intense heat. Fire also creates this patchwork quilt of different habitats across the landscape, recently burned areas, older growth areas. And that variety, that mosaic, helps promote overall species diversity.
So fire isn't always the enemy in nature.
Definitely not. But when it gets out of control, threatens homes and lives, then we need firefighters.
Right.
Most developed areas have dedicated fire services to extinguish or contain uncontrolled fires. They use specialized trucks, pumps, hoses, water, special foams.
And spotting them early must be key for wildfires.
Crucial. We used to rely heavily on lookout towers perched on mountains. Apparently their use peaked around 1938. Now, it's mostly done with infrared sensors on satellites or aircraft, and planes or helicopters are also used for aerial firefighting, dropping water or retardant to support the crews on the ground.
It's a constant battle, it seems.
And beyond just putting fires out, managing fire is itself a really sophisticated skill. Think about traditional cooks, blacksmiths, iron masters.
Yeah, they needed precise control.
Exactly. They had this deep ingrained knowledge of different fuels, how to arrange them, how to stoke the fire just right, control the heat, the flame, even the smoke, and how to bank a fire overnight so you could easily revive it in the morning.
So it's this ancient craft that's now also a modern science, constantly evolving.
Perfectly put. And prevention is a huge part of modern management, too. Wildfire prevention programs use different strategies. Sometimes it's wildland fire use, where you monitor naturally caused fires, like from lightning, but let them burn if they're not threatening anything because they're doing ecological good. Other times, agencies intentionally set prescribed or controlled burns. They pick the right weather conditions, have crews standing by, and carefully burn an area to reduce fuel loads and mimic natural fire cycles safely.
Right, those cool fires we talked about.
Exactly. And of course, there's basic fire safety education, fire drills, making sure buildings meet fire codes.
Sprinklers and things.
Sprinklers, fire-resistant materials in buildings, cars, planes. It's all tested. And, starting destructive fires on purpose, arson, that's a serious crime.
Yeah.
Fire insurance is also part of the picture, helping people recover financially when prevention fails.
It's this whole ecosystem of science, skill, prevention, and response. But beyond all the practical stuff, fire just has this undeniable grip on our imagination, our culture, our psychology.
Immensely so. It's been a central element in human culture right back to the lower Paleolithic. Think about fire worship.
People worshipped fire.
Widely practiced, apparently, way back in prehistory. We find structures dedicated to fire rituals dating back thousands of years to the Chalcolithic or Copper Age. Zoroastrianism, the ancient Persian religion, is very closely linked with fire reference. In many ancient societies, fire was seen either as a god itself or as a direct manifestation of the divine. The hearth fire in the home often symbolized that sacred heavenly fire.
And the myths. Who can forget Prometheus, the Greek titan who stole fire from the gods to give it to humans?
Exactly. Those origin myths tell you how fundamental fire was seen to be for civilization itself.
Right.
Fire also plays a big role in how we handle death. Funerary practices involving fire. Pyres, they go back to ancient Rome in the West and even further back, maybe 4,000 years ago, on the Indian subcontinent. Cremation is a very old Hindu tradition, and now it's common worldwide.
So what does all this ancient history, this deep symbolism, what does it mean for us today? We still gather around fire, don't we? Just maybe in different ways.
We absolutely do. Think about bonfires for celebration. Guy Fawkes Night in the UK is a big one.
Right, November 5th.
The whole barbecue tradition, especially in the U.S., that's all about community and cooking over fire, and fireworks, lighting up the sky for New Year's or other big celebrations around the world.
Yeah, but fire's also used in protest, isn't it? The flip side.
Yes. Book burning has a long, dark history as an act of censorship and suppression. And burning an effigy, making a dummy of someone you dislike and setting it on fire, that's still a form of protest, you see, like the Judas ritual in some places during Easter. Fire can symbolize both community and defiance, creation and destruction.
It holds so many meanings. What about our individual fascination? Watching a campfire, it feels almost primal.
It does feel that way, but interestingly, the research suggests humans don't actually have an instinctual fascination with fire baked into our genes.
Really?
Apparently so, but certainly in modern societies, adults are often drawn to it out of curiosity, maybe a sense of comfort or nostalgia. Children, interestingly, tend to lose a strong fascination with it around age 7, maybe just through more regular, safe exposure. And it's probably worth quickly differentiating some related behaviors. There's arson, intentionally setting fires to cause damage, which is a crime. Then there's pyromania, which is a rare impulse control disorder where someone feels compelled to set fires.
Okay.
And then there's pyrophobia, which is an intense, irrational fear of fire. So fascination, criminal intent, compulsion, fear, our relationship is complex.
What an incredible journey we've taken, just exploring fire. We've gone from its ancient origins billions of years ago. Millions, right? 470 million, not billion. It's basic science, and then it's just profound impact on humanity's story. From being this essential tool for survival and energy to this powerful cultural symbol and, a devastating weapon. It really has shaped everything, civilizations, ecosystems, even our own biology. adapting to the smoke.
It's not just a chemical reaction, is it? It truly is this living force that's danced through time alongside us.
Yeah, a dance. I like that.
And that dance is still going on. Which maybe raises a final important question for you, the listener, to think about. We're seeing this trend of huge mega fires. Fires' role in climate change is growing. So even with all our science, all our understanding, all our attempts at control, are we really managing fire's long-term impact on the planet? Or are we maybe just entering a new and potentially much more challenging chapter of this Pyrocene, this age of human fire?
Have you ever really thought about what connects, say, the coffee in your mug to the apples in your fruit bowl? Or even, the wildflowers you see blooming in the field. We often just enjoy all this stuff from the natural world without maybe a second thought about how it actually gets here. But what if I told you that so much of life on Earth, including a huge chunk of our food supply, relies on this tiny, really intricate, and often pretty invisible biological dance? Today, we're doing a deep dive into pollination. And it's way more than just a bee buzzing around a flower. It's actually a fundamental process. It underpins entire ecosystems. It feeds billions of people. So we're going to pull back the curtain a bit, look at its surprising mechanisms, maybe uncover the incredible diversity of who's actually doing the work, and importantly, shine a light on the critical challenges it's facing right now. Our mission really is to give you a quick but thorough understanding, hopefully sparking some genuine aha moments about something so fundamental, yet, well, largely unseen. So let's start with the absolute basics. What is pollination, really, at its core?
Right. Well, at its simplest, just picture a flower. It produces this tiny kind of dust-like stuff called pollen that's basically the plant sending out its genetic message, And it also has a sticky bit, the stigma, like a landing pad. Pollination is just that, getting the pollen from the sender part, the anther, onto that sticky receiver part, the stigma. It's the plant's version of a crucial delivery service. It makes sure new seeds and so new life can actually be created.
Okay, so a simple transfer, it sounds like. But I gather the internal mechanics, especially for flowering plants, angiosperms get pretty clever.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, with flowering plants, it gets really fascinating. They use this trick called double fertilization.
Wow.
So once that little pollen grain lands on the stigma, it sends down a tube, think of it like a microscopic pipeline, right down to the ovule. But here's the kicker. It delivers two special genetic packages. Yeah, two. One goes to create the seeds. Let's call it a packed lunch, the nutritious part, the endosperm that helps the baby plant grow. And the other one forms the actual embryo, the future plant itself. It's a remarkably efficient system they've got for ensuring the next generation gets a really strong start.
Wow, that's a lot of biological engineering happening in something so small.
Yeah.
So what about older plant groups, like conifers, the gymnosperms? How do they manage it? Their reproductive structures are quite different, right? More exposed.
That's a great question. Yeah, they definitely have a distinct approach. And it's fascinating, too. With gymnosperms, you see sort of two main methods. Some, like cycads and the ginkgo tree, they still have motile sperm that actually swim directly to the egg inside the ovule.
Wow, really? Swim?
Yeah. But then conifers, the pines and firs we recognize, they also use a pollen tube to deliver non-motile sperm. It's a bit like angiosperms in that way, just without the ovule being enclosed in an ovary.
And the pollen grain itself, even before fertilization, it has quite a journey, doesn't it? Like its own little preparation process.
It really does. You can kind of think of it like a tiny astronaut getting ready for launch. First, there's hydration. Pollen grains are actually severely dehydrated for transport, makes them lighter, easier to move around. Germination, is starting to grow. That only happens after they rehydrate on the stigma.
Ah, so it's a safety switch.
Exactly. It's a brilliant safety mechanism. It stops the pollen from germinating too early inside the anther where it wouldn't do any good. Once it's rehydrated, the pollen activates, sort of reorganizes its insides, and then the pollen tube emerges, growing down towards the ovule.
Okay, so we've kind of unpacked what pollination is at a biological level. Now, the big question, who or what is actually doing all this crucial work? You mentioned plants optimizing energy, and it seems like they rely on two main methods: biotic living things and abiotic non-living forces.
That's right. And a key thing to grasp here is just the sheer scale of the biotic side, the living pollinators. About 80% of all flowering plants rely on them. We're talking an incredible range, somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 species of animals acting as pollinators for the world's, 250,000 species of flowering plants?
That many. Wow.
Yeah, it really forces you to rethink who the workers in our ecosystems are, So many operating largely unseen.
And the vast majority of these powerhouse workers are insects, right? Bees, obviously, especially the hymenopterans like honeybees, bumblebees.
Right, but also wasps, beetles, moths, butterflies, flies.
And it's wild to think this partnership, insect pollination, goes back to the dinosaur era.
Yeah, it's ancient. And this long partnership has led to some really clever adaptations. Take flower constancy, for instance. Insects like honeybees, they often stick to visiting just one species of flower during a single foraging trip.
Like brand loyalty for flowers.
Kind of. It's like going to a buffet and deciding, okay, I'm just sticking to the dessert table because I know it's good and it's efficient. It benefits the bee, saves time finding good stuff, and the plant gets efficient pollen transfer, to its own kind.
And it's not just about being constant, it's about attraction, too. Flowers are masters of sensory allure.
Totally. They use bright colors for pollinators active during the day.
Right.
Or maybe little color, but really strong aromatic scents for the night shift pollinators.
I read about some orchids attracting specific orchid bees, and there was even a suggestion that some might literally intoxicate the bees.
Yeah.
Making them hang around longer.
Yeah, that's been observed. Some visits can last up to 90 minutes. And beyond just attraction, some flowers have developed these highly specialized mechanisms. Think of buzz pollination. A bee has to vibrate at a specific frequency.
Like a tiny jackhammer.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
To shake the pollen loose. Or you have flowers that actually trap pollinators inside for a bit just to maximize the chances of getting pollen transferred. It's this amazing dance of persuasion and precision.
Okay, so insects are clearly the main players, but the animal kingdom's role goes further, right? Vertebrates, too.
Definitely. Vertebrates are significant. Birds like hummingbirds and sunbirds, often drawn to red flowers. Bats, usually going for white petals, strong scent, night flowering plants.
Standard examples.
Yeah.
But you mentioned surprises.
Oh, yeah. There are definitely surprises. You've got monkeys, lemurs, squirrels, possums, all getting in on the act. In South Africa, certain Proteus species, they're pollinated by rodents.
Rodents? Really?
Yeah, specifically the Cape spiny mouse and elephant shrews. The flowers grow near the ground, they smell kind of yeasty, aren't colorful, perfectly adapted for these little furry guys. And they can digest this high-sugar nectar that birds actually avoid.
That's incredible. And I was genuinely amazed to find out pollination isn't just on land or just furry and feathered creatures. Are there any really out there pollinators?
Oh, absolutely. Reptiles, for instance. It's a minority role, but it's ecologically important, especially on islands where maybe insects and birds are less stable. Certain geckos are known pollinators. And there's this lizard, Podarcis leuforti. It's a major pollinator for a type of spurge on Mediterranean islands.
Lizards. Wow.
And then, diving into the truly unexpected, recent discoveries have shown invertebrates, mostly small crustaceans, acting as pollinators underwater in seagrass beds.
Underwater pollination.
Yeah.
By crustaceans.
Yep. And even more recently, a type of isopod, Idotea balthica, was found helping a seaweed, Gracilaria gracilis, reproduce. That's the first known case of an animal helping algae reproduce. It just keeps broadening our understanding.
Okay, so shifting from the living to the non-living. Abiotic pollination. Relying on wind, water, rain. This lets plants save energy they'd otherwise spend attracting animals, right?
That's the idea. And when we talk abiotic, wind is the absolute giant. About 98% of abiotic pollination is anemophily wind pollination. And it's actually way more efficient than people used to think. Plants have evolved specific heights, specific flower structures to really optimize pollen dispersal and capture, like what you see with common catgrass.
Right. And then there's water pollination hydrophily, pollen floating like tiny rafts.
Exactly. Sometimes even whole anthers float. A classic example is Vallisneria spiralis, this aquatic plant where the male flowers literally detach, float to the surface, and bump into the female flowers, like a little watery dating service.
Okay. And rain. That seems less intuitive.
It's a smaller percentage, yeah. Used, especially when insect activity might be low. In plants like Ranunculus flammula, the excess rain drains away, and that allows floating pollen to just drift into contact with the stigma. Even more amazing, some orchids like Acampa rigida. Raindrops literally hit a part of the flower and cause the pollen to be shot upwards for self-pollination.
Like a trick shot.
Seriously, a botanical trick shot.
It really sounds like plants have these incredibly specific strategies. But is nature ever flexible? Can plants switch methods if, say, their main pollinator disappears? Is there a plan B?
That's a great point, and yes, absolutely. Nature is incredibly adaptable. What's fascinating here is that flexibility. Some plants can switch pollination methods. There's an orchid, Clades maculata, that uses both rain and butterflies, depending on the conditions. It just shows how adaptable life can be when survival's on the line.
So we know the players, we know the methods. Let's talk about the actual mechanics of fertilization inside the plant. We hear about cross-pollination and self-pollination. What's the basic difference? Why does it matter?
Okay, so cross-pollination, or allogamy, is when pollen gets delivered from one plant to a flower on a different plant, but of the same species. Think of it like finding a partner from a different family line. Plants adapted for this often have really cool ways to prevent self-pollination. Maybe their male and female parts are physically separated, or they mature at different times, all to encourage that genetic mixing.
More genetic diversity.
Exactly. And then there's self-pollination. That's when pollen from one flower pollinates the very same flower that's autogamy, or maybe another flower on the exact same plant, which is gytonogamy.
And that's more of a backup plan if pollinators are scarce.
Often, yeah. It evolves when external pollinators are unreliable. So plants that can self-pollinate and still produce viable offspring are called self-fertile. But some plants are self-sterile. They must cross-pollinate to make seeds. So there's this crucial trade-off. Cross-pollination gives you genetic diversity, but self-pollination is like an insurance policy, making sure you reproduce even if conditions aren't ideal.
And speaking of insurance policies,
Yeah.
here's what gets really clever. Cleistogamy. Self-pollination before the flower even opens.
Isn't that wild? Yeah, cleistogamy. The pollen is released right inside the closed bud, or sometimes a pollen tube just grows directly down the style to the ovules. Some of these flowers never open at all.
Wow, so it's like a guaranteed reproduction method.
It's essentially a genetic backup system, yeah. An evolutionary failsafe. Some orchids and grasses are always cleistogamous. Others might switch to it under bad conditions just to guarantee some seed production. You can even find plants that have a mix, some open flowers called chasmogamous, and some of these closed cleistogamous ones. And get this, the ground bean actually produces its cleistogamous flowers entirely underground.
Underground flowers, nature's ultimate contingency plan, maybe.
You could say that.
Okay, so moving beyond the individual plant. In agriculture, we hear the term pollinizers. That sounds important for farmers.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Pollinizers are simply the plants that provide the pollen source for other plants. It's a really key part of managing pollination in modern farming. Take peaches, for example. They're considered self-fertile. They can produce a commercial crop on their own, but cross-pollination often gives you a better yield, better fruit.
Right.
But apples are largely self-incompatible. To get a commercial crop, you need pollen from a different apple variety.
So how do farmers manage that?
That's why growers often graft a limb of a suitable pollinizer variety, maybe a crabapple, onto every few trees in the orchard. It's a deliberate, human-managed intervention to make sure nature's process works for our food supply.
It's incredible to think this whole intricate dance has been going on for such a long time. Let's talk coevolution, this ancient, dynamic partnership.
Yeah, the history is deep. The fossil record shows abiotic pollination, like wind, goes way back to fern-like plants in the late Carboniferous. Biotic pollination, we see evidence for gymnosperms as early as the Triassic. But what's really striking is the parallel explosion, the radiation of flowering plants, angiosperms, and insects in the early Cretaceous.
So they evolved together.
It strongly suggests that, yeah. And the evolution of nectaries, the sugary reward in late Cretaceous flowers, that's seen as a direct signal of the start of this crucial mutual relationship between insects, especially bees and wasps, and flowering plants.
And the classic example of this give and take, this perfect partnership, has to be bees and flowers.
Absolutely. Flowers give bees nectar for energy, pollen for protein. In return, bees are carrying that pollen around. But it's not just food. Bees also visit flowers for things like oil, fragrance, resin, even waxes.
And this partnership isn't static, right? It drives evolution on both sides.
Totally dynamic. There's this incredible story of the Rediviva neeliana bee and the Diaschia capsularis flower. Picture this. The flower needs the bee, but it hides its oil reward deep inside these long spurs.
Okay.
So the bee, wanting the oil, evolves longer and longer legs to reach it.
Yeah.
And then the flower, in response, evolves even longer spurs, ensuring only the bees with the perfectly long legs can get the reward and, crucially, pick up and deliver its pollen effectively.
It's like an evolutionary arms race.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A beautiful example of how two species can literally shape each other over millions of years.
Which brings us right to agriculture's huge dependence on these systems today. I mean, our staple crops, wheat, maize, rice, soybeans, sorghum, they're mostly wind or self-pollinated. But about 10% of the total human diet, by calories, globally, comes directly from insect pollination. You think about your morning fruit salad berries, apples, the almonds in your granola, all thanks to pollinators.
Yeah, and because of that dependence, pollination management has become this major branch of modern agriculture. The biggest managed pollination event on Earth happens every spring in California's almond orchards. Nearly half, about 1 million hives of the entire U.S. honeybee population gets trucked there.
1 million hives. That's staggering.
It is. And New York's apple crop needs about 30,000 hives. Maine's blueberry crop uses around 50,000 hives each year. It's a massive logistical operation.
So for beekeepers, many have basically become pollination contractors, migrating with the seasons.
That's exactly it. They follow the blooms across the country, just like combine harvesters follow the wheat harvest.
And it's not just honeybees, right?
No, definitely not. Alfalfa leafcutter bees are vital for alfalfa seed production out west in the U.S. and Canada. And bumblebees are increasingly used in greenhouses, especially for tomatoes. They're very efficient pollinators in those controlled environments.
The economic value here must be enormous.
Oh, it's huge. The American Institute of Biological Sciences estimates that native insect pollination alone saves the U.S. agricultural economy something like $3.1 billion a year. Globally, pollination generates $40 billion worth of products annually, just in the U.S. And there's this bonus. Having wild habitats like forests nearby can actually boost crop yields for things like apples, almonds, coffee by about 20%. It's this massive hidden subsidy from nature.
Despite this incredible value, this foundational role they play, we are facing a profound crisis. Pollinator decline is a major environmental threat.
It really is. Pollinator decline and colony collapse disorder is the most famous part of that. It's threatening biodiversity, the very functioning of ecosystems. It messes up crucial early plant regeneration like seed dispersal and pollination itself. Animal pollination helps maintain genetic variability in plants, which is vital for their survival, their adaptation, and the numbers. They're quite alarming. More than 87.5% of all flowering plants, over 75% of tropical tree species, maybe 30–40% of temperate tree species. They all depend on this process.
So let's zoom in. What are the main things driving this decline? What's causing it?
It's usually a combination of factors. Habitat destruction is a big one, fragmentation of natural areas, logging, converting land.
Yeah.
Then there's the misuse and overuse of pesticides. Neonicotinoids in particular have been shown to impact bee nervous systems, mess up colony relations.
Right.
Parasitism and diseases are also major players. And then overlaying all of that is climate change.
How does climate change fit in?
It causes mismatches, phenological mismatches, where maybe plants flower earlier because it's warmer, but the pollinators haven't emerged yet. And spatial shifts, where plants and pollinators move to different areas seeking suitable climates, but maybe not ending up in the same place. All these things together put immense pressure on them.
And the impact is measurable. I read the U.S. saw something like a 59% loss of honeybee colonies between 1947 and 2005.
That's right, a huge drop. And butterflies are also really feeling it. They're sensitive indicators of environmental health, reacting quickly to things like habitat loss and human impact.
So this really brings up the crucial question. How does this actually affect you, the listener?
Well, think about it. Pollination is necessary for 3/4 of the plant species that make up the world's food supply. Insect pollinators contribute over $200 billion in crop value globally. They improve crop quality, they boost genetic diversity in our crops, and importantly, they help produce foods rich in essential micronutrients, vitamins and minerals that are often lacking in those big staple crops like corn or rice that are wind or self-pollinated.
So fewer pollinators could mean less nutritious food.
Potentially, yes. If pollinator populations keep declining, vitamin and mineral deficiencies could actually become more widespread in the human diet. It's not just about having enough food, it's about the quality of that food. It really connects back to our health.
Something else that seems really important here is how these pollinators interact. Wild pollinators often visit lots of different plants, forming these really complex networks.
Exactly. And researchers have found, quite surprisingly, that the structure of these networks looks very similar in very different ecosystems all around the world. There's a common pattern.
And these networks, they provide stability.
They do. They minimize competition between pollinators. They can help species survive tough conditions. But there's a downside to that interconnectedness.
Which is?
If conditions deteriorate past a certain critical point, pollinator species can collapse simultaneously across the network.
A domino effect.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And recovering from that kind of widespread collapse could be much, much harder than the initial decline was. It's like a finely balanced house of cards. You pull out a few key cards, and the whole thing can just tumble down.
This crisis obviously hits the economics of commercial pollination really hard, too. You mentioned the huge global value honeybees provide, $235 billion to $577 billion.
That's the estimated range, yeah. And for U.S. beekeepers, back in 2016, 41% of their income came just from pollination services. It was their single biggest revenue source.
And the almond industry in California really exemplifies this whole complex situation, doesn't it? An $11 billion business relying almost entirely on trucking bees in.
Right. It consumes up to 82% of the entire U.S. pollination market. About 60% of all managed bee colonies in the U.S. get moved to California's Central Valley every February just for almonds.
But you mentioned hidden costs. Challenges for the beekeepers.
Yeah, despite getting paid quite a lot per colony for almonds, maybe $165, which is roughly 3 times what they get for other crops, they face really high colony losses and expected 30% annual mortality rate.
30%. Why so high?
Well, the Central Valley itself,
Yeah.
it can have poor air quality. And just mixing millions of hives together from all over the country creates perfect conditions for diseases and mites like varroa to spread rapidly. And this doesn't just hurt the managed bees. These pathogens can spill over into wild bee populations too, which are already struggling.
So what does it mean for the beekeepers' bottom line?
It means it's incredibly tough. A recent study basically showed that once you factor in all the costs of maintaining bees, specifically for almond pollination, feeding them, treating diseases, replacing lost colonies, it's barely profitable, or maybe not even profitable at all for the average beekeeper.
Wow.
It paints this really complex picture of a system under immense strain. A vital ecological service that we depend on is tied to this really fragile economic model for the people providing it.
So wrapping up, today we've taken quite a deep dive into pollination. And it's clearly far more than just, a simple interaction. It's dynamic, it's ancient, incredibly diverse, and just fundamental. Fundamental to our planet's biodiversity and crucially to our food security.
Yeah, and if we connect all these dots by the intricate fragility of these plant pollinator networks, the stark economic realities facing commercial pollination, it really brings up an important question maybe for you listening. Given all this, what role do you think consumers, farmers, maybe policymakers need to play in safeguarding this essential relationship for the future? How can understanding these delicate balances encourage us all to protect the tiny, often overlooked forces that literally feed our world?